Annuity do.
The remix version.
All right, we're back. Another
Welcome back.
episode. Welcome back to the I Love Annuities Podcast. I am Jeremiah Conger.
And I am Zachary Van Ness. Together we are the Annuity Dudes.
Annuity do. And today we're diving into a powerful and often overlooked topic, behavioral psychology and its impact in retirement planning. This episode is going to be a game changer for sure.
Yeah, and really when we're looking at this, part of the reason why we're addressing the topic today is no matter how good the financial plan has been put in place, if the emotions end up taking the wheel, it can all go sideways pretty quick. And for retirees especially, there's less room for error.
Yeah, that couldn't be any more true, especially given the recent market volatility that we're experiencing. A lot of people are fearful and they're scared of, what this all could mean for their future and the longevity of their retirement plan. And especially when you're looking at income and the markets being the kind of determining factor of how much income you may receive if you're using your market accounts for your source of income. It can be a scary time for many. But today we're talking about those emotions, and those are fear, greed, regret, and loss aversion, and how these emotions can literally steal your retirement if you're not careful.
Yeah, and what we'll also show is just really how these annuities can neutralize some of those behavioral traps, right? So we look at the psychology and these behavioral traps that we can get into. And really what we'll do is ultimately give you back the confidence and the clarity that you need in that planning.
Exactly. So let's start with a stat that shocked us. We were researching some analysis that was conducted in a study for this next episode, and some of the things we came across were pretty alarming. But according to DALBAR, the most recent DALBAR study, over a 30-year period, the S&P 500 returned around 10%, but the average investor only made around 3 to 4%. And the question is why? I'm going to pull up our DALBAR report here for those that may be watching on YouTube. Let's see if I can do that without messing
Yeah,
up.
while you're doing that, just to define, so DALBAR is the nation's leading financial service market research firm. So part of why we're using this is it is a reliable source that we can fall back on.
Yeah, here we go. Can you see my screen, Zach?
Yeah, you're good.
So some of the key findings in the DALBAR study was that the average equity fund investor underperformed the market. And that is the average equity investor earned 5.5% less than the S&P 500 in 2023, which was the third largest investor gap in the last 10 years. This study was conducted in April of last year, so it's about 1 year old now, but it's still, the study and the research still holds true today because we're seeing the same exact behaviors, and those behaviors repeat themselves during these market cycles. So the other key finding was the average fixed income investor underperformed to a lesser degree. The average fixed income investor earned 2.63% less than the Bloomberg Barclays aggregate bond index gain. And the reason for that is because of the emotional decisions that ultimately hurt returns. Investors tend to sell out of investments during downturns and miss out on the rebounds. And the report here illustrates the importance of a long-term investment strategy. The other finding was that retention rates increased. The average equity fund investor held on to equity funds for a longer period in 2023 compared to 2022. So I have another paper here I'm going to share. It has a nice chart to kind of illustrate what this research is indicating here. So while I'm doing that, just bear with me. Let me get that
Yeah,
pulled
just
up
to
here.
kind of summarize what you were sharing there while you're pulling that up, it's a behavioral bias, right? So what we're finding is that investors are panicking, or they're going into a panic mode, and they're selling during the downturn and then buying back when the market feels safe. Again, we're making an emotional decision with this, which is almost always after a recovery. Um, so it's really the opposite concept of buy low and sell high.
Yeah. See, what happens is when you try to time the market by selling when it's falling with the notion that you'll get it back when it rises again, you'll likely miss the best days of the market. And because the market turns so quickly, what happens is that when looking back over a 20-year period, in this case, from January 1 of 2004 to December 29th of 2023, six
Scroll
of
up
the
a little
seven,
bit if you don't mind.
scroll up,
I'm sorry, down. There, you're good right there. Okay.
um, 6 of the 7 best days occurred after the worst days. And 7 of the best 10 days fell within 2 weeks of the 10 worst days within that 2-decade period. That's pretty interesting stuff there. And so, what happens if you sell and miss those best days? Your return potential can fall dramatically. That's really ultimately what happens. And for example, over the last 20 years, if you stayed fully invested in an S&P 500 index fund, your money should have grown by 9.8%. But what if you sold during a market downturn and then missed those 10 best days? Your portfolio would be less than half of that at just 5.6%. So missing the best 20 days would even be more detrimental, and it would cut your return by more than 70%. And this is the chart I wanted to share that illustrates the impact of time out of the market. So if you look to the far left, you'll see if you were fully invested in the stock in the S&P 500 index fund over that 20-year window, your return would have been 9.7%. But if you missed just 10 days, the 10 best days in that period, your return would be literally more than half less at 5.5%. And if you miss the 20 best days, it goes down to 2.8%. And then beyond 30 days, it's literally not even anything to write home about. It's less than 1% and then actually negative from there. So it really goes to show you the impact of trying to time the market, which nobody, again, nobody in this world is an expert. Nobody has a crystal ball of what is going to happen today, tomorrow, 5 or 10 years from now. Nobody knows. And what really makes a positive impact on your money is being in the market. So rather than trying to time getting in and getting out, if you can create a plan that affords you the wherewithal and the ability to ride out these market downturns and ride the roller coaster, then that's when the true optimization occurs and your returns and the growth of your portfolio will be in a very positive light long term. But if you're not in the market, the chances of that happening is very slim to none. And I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to that, we're in the market, then they come to meet with us, they get out of the market, they're out of the market and they're fearful to get back in. And they're looking at alternatives to, address their income plan so that they can, have income without the markets telling them that they can't have income. In other words, if you're using the market just for your income as your primary income source besides Social Security, and then we have these volatile periods where the markets go down and you're being forced to sell shares at a lower price, which is essentially compounding your loss to generate that income that you need, that's a recipe for disaster. And there are much better ways, but it's just about educating yourself on the ways that can truly optimize the overall approach. And that's where we start to talk about, compartmentalizing your money and giving your money intended purpose and bucketing it into different buckets that have a different design and intended purpose so that you can ultimately stay disciplined. And that's where the behavioral psychology comes into this episode.
Yeah. I mean, you nailed it there. Um, Great points all around. And I think we run into those scenarios quite frequently where we'll meet with a client and, well, I'm just waiting to get to this point. I'm waiting to get to this dollar amount. and it just becomes this chasing game. And sometimes it's timing the market of getting in and out of it. Sometimes it's waiting till they reach a certain dollar amount to make a decision, um, and it doesn't always prove to be the best practice.
Yeah, without a doubt. I actually had a meeting yesterday with a couple. Um, they were out in Texas. Very nice couple. They've been retired for 1 year. So they tried to do the market thing with, hey, we're going to get our income out of the markets, and that should all be fine and dandy. And here we are, April of 25, where sitting today, I just looked at the markets. The S&P's down about 5% now. It's actually bounced back a little bit. The Nasdaq is down about 8 or 9%, um, and that's also from after a recent bounce back. And here we are. Here this couple is, and they're 1 year into retirement, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to get income, and they've been using the market gains to source that income. And part of the conversation when we were talking about the mechanics of the income annuity is I illustrated the worst case scenario, which would be that when you activate the lifetime income benefit in the annuity, that the account value depletes to zero, over like a 13 to 15-year period. And he goes, well, if that's the case, I'll just keep my money in my IRA, and as long as I can get 7% a year, that money will never deplete to zero. And I said, sir, I said, unfortunately, that sounds good on paper if you were just going to straight line a 7% annualized return
Hmm.
and straight line it all the way down for the next 25 or 30 years. I said, but if you look at an S&P 500 chart, for an example, it's not a straight line. It looks like a heart rate. It's literally spiking and dropping and spiking and dropping every single day, every single month, and every single year. And that's the way it works. Durable sequence of returns over a long period of time, that can have a detrimental impact on the account's overall value. If you're sourcing income and that those returns are not favorable, in other words, you're having kind of abysmal or lackluster returns, or maybe even negative drops in the market over a 10-year window, and they're not on your side, those market returns are not on your side, you're going to deplete that account very rapidly. And the difference in keeping your money in the IRA and going that route versus in the annuity is that when you run out of money in the IRA, it's gone. The income stops. It's like turning off the water spigot. But in the income annuity, if that were to happen, the same exact situation, the contract for the guaranteed income rider stipulates that regardless of what happens to the account's value, if it does deplete to zero, the income will never stop. It'll continue to pay for both you and your wife as long as either one of you have a pulse. And that's where the true peace of mind comes in. And the optimization can then occur because the rest of your assets can be positioned in a growth oriented manner, being in the markets. And you can completely eliminate the timing. You don't have to time in, getting in and getting out. And as we just looked at in the DALBAR study and that article and chart from the Motley Fool, if you don't worry about timing anything and you just stay put, that's where the real growth happens. So once I kind of shed light on that, especially for the wife, because she doesn't like the markets at all, she's very conservative. They fell in love with it. They fell in love with the plan because it gave them clarity and it gave them confidence. And more importantly, it gave them discipline, that they have something that they can really move forward with and stay put when they need to so that they don't make bad decisions.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And a similar situation that I had, and this was in November, in which a client was, we were having the conversation about looking at annuities, and sounded like everything was going to move forward, and he was ready to go. I said, you know what, I'm right there. I just need about 3,000 more to get to the number I need to get to. And he didn't get there. And now he's in a holding pattern until he can make a decision. He's got some health concerns that need to be addressed, and there's other variables to consider. And it's just, creates this compounding effect of stressors that have now been created on top of regular everyday life stressors. Um, so just a matter of
It,
defining
it, it,
what's
it
important.
100%. It really blows my mind that people go to like into retirement without a plan. I saw a study the other day. We should have made an episode about this. Maybe we can next week or the week after. But I saw an alarming stat. I could not believe it. It was 73% of people retiring today have zero plan.
Well, and we've mentioned this before,
73%.
is just that who the hell is there to teach you about it?
Yeah.
Nobody's giving this to you in an educational course. These chicken seminar dinners aren't creating a spreadsheet for you to say, hey, here's how to plan for retirement.
uh, Agreed. And that's where, again, I always try to blame, I do blame Wall Street, because there's an enormous bias there. Because it lines their pockets that, hey, you need to use stay in the market and keep everything in the market. And, oh, if it goes down, don't worry, it'll always come back. And while that might be true, and it is true, I don't deny that. That is a fact that it does come back. There's never been a point in time in history that it hasn't. It's just how long does it take to come back?
Mhm.
That's what they don't tell you.
Yeah.
If you look back at the black swan events in the last 25 years, on average, it took about 5.5 years for the markets to rebound. And for the early 2000s in that dot-com bubble bust there, it took 10 years. The entire 10-year decade, they call it the lost decade. There were no gains in the market. You didn't break even until that 10th year. And that's just incredible to me. But
Yeah.
you're right, though. There's not enough education out there. In addition to that, if you look at retirement accounts and the way that most people save today is through a 401k through their employer. In those 401k plans, they utilize what are called target date funds. And target date funds are basically like a sliding scale of decreasing risk the closer you get to your retirement age. So if you log into your 401k and you see that it says, my mom's a nurse, so she works for HCA. And so hers says like HCA target date fund 2040 or whatever it says.
Mhm.
And so that the year 2040 indicates the year you plan to retire. But as you start to get closer to that date or that year, the risk in the portfolio or in the fund starts to decrease. And the way that they do that is they just shift a position from, an equity position over to the bond position. And it starts to change over time. And so at the end of the plan, you'll have more bonds than you do stocks. But that is such an old way of thinking, and it doesn't still address the retirement planning problem, the retirement income planning problem. It just further, laments the fact that you might only be educated on using the markets to grow your money, so therefore you're easy to then associate the markets with income too, and that's wrong. And so what we're actually starting to see, which is really interesting for our industry, is we're starting to see since 2020, there was model regulation that was input by the Trump administration, and it was called the Secure Act. And the Secure Act, I can't remember exactly what it stood for. It's setting every community up for retirement efficiency or something like that. I can't remember. But the Secure Act, there was model legislation in there that would allow these 401k administrators to now include income annuities in the plan. So rather than just having a target date fund that's shifting allocation between stocks and bonds, some of them now are starting to implement an annuity instead of the bond or in combination with the bond and the stocks. And why that's
Mhm.
important is now you're starting to build, if you do that and you're in that type of plan, you're able to build your own personal pension. And that's really the beauty of being able to retire with confidence is having pension like income. And that's what goes into that behavioral psychology because you have that ticket to spend the money that's in that pension-like income stream through the annuity. And it allows you then to be disciplined to stay put in the markets for your growth assets. Just like during your working years, I ask this question all the time in my meetings. I ask my clients or prospective clients, I say, okay, you're fearful of the markets today. I get that. You're close to retirement, or maybe you've recently retired. Totally understand you. But what did you do 25 years ago in 2000 when you were working? Did you worry about the market drop then? And I always get the same response, and it's no, I didn't even care. And I ask them, well, why? Why didn't you care then? And they usually say, like, well, I was younger and I was making good money. And at that time, like, I didn't care about my retirement account because it was so far away. I said, yeah, that makes sense to me. But really what the common denominator is here in that scenario is that you had earned income. If you were back then at 25, 30 years of age in 2000 and you didn't have earned income, you'd be looking at that portfolio completely differently because that might have been your income source. So that's where the dilemma is today is people are retiring their earned income and they don't know what to do. And when the markets go down, they associate that with their income, you know, their future income and their current income. And they're scared to lose that because then they have to adjust their lifestyle. They have to spend less. They have to downsize and all these other bad things. But if you can replace that income, the earned income with guaranteed income, think about what that does. It makes it to where you are no longer fearful. And it's no different than when you were 25, 35 years old in 2000 because you had earned income then and you didn't care what happened to your account because if anything, you were benefiting because you're able to continue contributing in that down market and buying all those stocks at a discount. Everything was on sale. So in other words, what I'm trying to say here is like if you can figure out the income and associate it no different than your earned income and have it guaranteed contractually, the benefits and the power and the peace of mind and the optimizations that occur are truly unmatched. I say it all the time. There's no other more powerful tool in retirement than guaranteed income. Guaranteed incomes there's three sources out there in the world. Pensions, which less than 14% of private sector employees have today. Social Security still considered a guaranteed income stream, and then income annuities. That's the third one. So um, I know I talked a lot there, so I apologize, but I'm
No,
really
no, you're
passionate
good.
about
I
helping
mean,
people with this problem because when you hear it all the time, like I do from the people, it's the same song and dance. And then you get frustrated because it's like these poor people are going through this crap because of our culture. Our culture teaches us to use the stock market for growth, but no one talks about how to use anything else for income and retirement. And we want to change that, and then we are changing that, and that's really the primary purpose of this podcast.
yeah, and I think, to add to that, the other component is 401k. The other concept that we work for an employer for 20, 30 years, and you've got this 401k, well, just set it and forget it, hands off. But when it gets to
Exactly.
that retirement planning, keyword there, plan time has to be put into that planning process and what that picture looks like. We've got to plan for the future and what's to come and how that picture looks. Thank God for us and having this podcast and this free information. By the way, hit that like and subscribe.
Yeah, and I'm really,
But
um, I'm really enjoying doing this podcast. I'm sure you are too, Zach,
yeah,
because it's allowing us, it's giving us a platform to express the way we feel about these things, and also being able to share the education and the knowledge, and also the real life experiences that we have in working in this subject matter. And it's really just about creating awareness. And I'm really glad to see there are some outfits that are starting to put education out there. There's some 501c3 organizations that are that are building their brand all around education and retirement planning. And I'm really thrilled to see that, because it's something that's like drastically needed, and we should have had it 20 years ago, honestly. But better late than never. But let's get back on topic here.
Yeah.
Let's really cover the 5 emotions that are sabotaging people's retirements. And it's very simple. The breakdown of the core emotions that retirees face. The number one is fear. And that's the fear of losing money that often causes people to sit in cash or exit the market during dips, which we're seeing. Number 2 is greed, and that's chasing these high returns, which leads to unnecessary risk. Number 3 is regret, looking back and saying, I should have. And that clouds the current decisions that they need to make. Number 4 is overconfidence, thinking that you can outsmart the market without a plan. I can't tell you how often I hear that one too, is I can do it myself. I can do it myself. Sure, you can do it yourself. There's no doubt, but you need to use the right tools. That doesn't change. Like, it's like the fundamentals of retirement planning don't go away. All the research out there supports it. All the research of, all the different markets and different cycles, and going back 50 years, and using different environments, economic environments. The research, you can't outsmart that. So
Mhm.
if you use the right tools and start to piece out your own plan, sure, you can do it yourself. And I truly do believe that. I'm going to put this out there, and I might get some flack from our advisor friends out there, that, the investment advisor group and all that. I think that the majority of people out there, if they've done a fair job at saving for retirement, they don't have to have a ton of money. They have to be living within their means. I think that's the most important part. But if they can build an income foundation, think of it like building a house. What's the first thing that's laid before they build the house? It's the foundation. The foundation is the most critical building block of retirement planning. And if anybody out there who has saved a fair amount, who's living within their means currently, if they can add an income annuity to bridge the gap between their living expenses and what Social Security currently covers, generally, Social Security is going to cover about 40% of someone's living expenses. If they can bridge the rest with a guaranteed income annuity, I'm going to say it right now, you don't need a financial advisor to do the rest. If you have the annuity, it's such a powerful tool. You don't need a financial advisor to manage anything else out there, within reason. I do believe you need a CPA, you need a tax advisor. Okay. I do think that that's important. But in regards to like managing stocks and stuff, like, that's ridiculous. You don't need that. The reason why is if you put enough money into the annuity to bridge the gap and support your living expenses now and into the future. If you take the rest of your assets that are outside of that annuity, now they're growth oriented, they're growth focused. That's the purpose of them. And you just go and buy a very credible S&P 500 index fund and put that money in there. You're going to outperform 95% of investment advisors out there. The stat states that less than 5% of investment advisors out there beat the S&P 500 every year. So why would you even need them? The
Mhm.
annuity gives you the ability to have that wherewithal that's needed to ride the ebbs and flows of the market and stay disciplined and stay put there. You just go out and put your investment into an S&P 500 index fund, and you're smooth sailing from there. So I really do believe that, and I'm sure I'm going to get some comments. They're welcome to believe me. I'd love to hear them. No offense. I think investment advisors are great, and we have some on our team here. They probably don't like me right now, but it's okay. I'll buy them lunch. But what I will tell you is that they have their purpose, but the income annuity is that powerful of a tool. And I truly believe in what it does in mitigating the risks associated with longevity and retirement. That if you just add that piece of the puzzle, think of it like a puzzle. The annuity is like half the puzzle. You already know exactly what the picture is going to look like. You just need to add the other small pieces to finish it. And you can do that on your own. And that's the beauty of it. So
Yeah.
But the fifth emotion, and then I'll pass it to you, Zach, is loss aversion. So research shows that losses are felt twice as intensely as gains, and people would rather avoid $1,000 loss than gain $2,000.
Yeah, and I think all of these fear, greed, regret, overconfidence, loss aversion. When we consider all of these together, these five, they're all human emotions. So nobody's faulting anybody for having these basic human emotions, but if they are left unchecked, they will cause us to make irrational decisions and costly choices. As with anything, anytime we're making an emotional decision, the idea is to sit back, think about it for a minute, sleep on it, and then make that decision. Don't make a in the moment decision.
Yeah, retirement's not the time to gamble. It's a completely different phase of your life. You're no longer in that accumulation phase, you're in the deaccumulation phase. The decumulation phase is about preserving wealth and generating income that you can't outlive.
Yeah. So I want to circle back a little bit to what I was mentioning before with a past client where he said, "Hey, I want to get to this number and then I'm ready to make a decision." And that's what's called anchoring bias, right? So anchoring bias is when people will get stuck on one number. Like I need a 10% return because that's what I got 20 years ago when I was in my 40s. Um, Even though when we really sit down and think about it, that risk that comes with retirement is completely different. We're looking at a new level of risk that's going to be a concern.
Yeah, then there's the framing bias. For example, someone might feel great about a guaranteed 5% payout. But when you translate that and say that's only $25,000 on a $500,000 annuity, they start to feel shortchanged.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, Same, really, when you're looking at that, it's the same outcome, different emotions, and framing matters. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where structured income from annuities is ultimately going to actually reduce all of this decision fatigue. And the reason for that is because they create consistency. And more importantly, the benefit that we talk about the most is the peace of mind that's created when an income annuity is there solidifying the foundation for their retirement income.
And we've talked about this before, not quite at nauseum just yet, but what we have found is those retirees who do have a guaranteed income stream are proven to retire happier, less stressed, and even actually live longer.
Yeah, there's been tons of research and studies out there that prove that fact. And one of them here is recently done in 2023. It was a
Mm.
study conducted by the Alliance for Lifetime Income, and their website is protectedincome.org. They're one of the 501c3 organizations out there. And what they found is that retirees with pensions or income annuities report higher life satisfaction and confidence than those without. I mean, it's pretty clear, especially right now, of why that might be. I can't tell you. I've been doing this a long time now. I have hundreds and hundreds of clients across all 50 states, and my phone hasn't rang once because of someone worried about the markets. My phone hasn't rang one time from a client saying, well, what's going to happen to my plan and what's going to happen to my income? They don't care because it's not a concern to them. I was just out at a financial services conference 2 weeks ago, and I'm one of the rogue people in there. I'm the annuity guy, and all the other people are generally investment advisors and financial planners and things, trying to use the markets to satisfy these retirement income demands that people have. And while there, I was talking to a couple of the bigger players, and they were saying how their phone has just been ringing off the hook since February, and it's because the people that they're serving don't have guaranteed income. Simple as that. And I said, well, why are they calling you? And they're like, they're worried about losing their money. And I said, well, what is the solution? And they said, well, we tell them just to stay put. their portfolio's diversified. That's always the thing they say. I don't mean to laugh, but it's like the same song and dance there too. It's like their portfolio's diversified. This is bound to happen, and we told them that in our initial discovery. Well, the problem there is that they don't have income. They don't have guaranteed income, and that's what's driving the panic and the worry and the fear and the concern.
Yeah, and when we're looking at that, what does that guaranteed income provide somebody? But, as we're getting later in life, it's number one, less financial decisions that have to be made. Maybe that frees up financial decisions or frees up the ability to make more aggressive financial decisions with monies that is in the market. So if you've got this guaranteed income element, now you've got the ability to be more aggressive in the market. Maybe that's there to fund vacations or to have some fun with the grandkids, whatever it might be. But really, you're not worrying about selling shares or how long your money will last. I often go back to the point about what that looks like on the golf course. You're getting to the first tee, and I play golf with some guys who are in their 60s and 70s, and hear the conversations. I'm a part of the conversations about how the market is today. I'm playing around tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to hearing what the conversation is about this week. And the question is that the conversation you want to have on the first tee while you're going out to play 18 holes? Not necessarily. I'd rather talk about how terrible my partner is and how he can't hit a drive worth of shit. But
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know, that's not how I want to enjoy my free time, is talking about how bad the stock market is and how it's affecting me in my retirement.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. Really, the guaranteed income and the psychology that is associated with the guaranteed income from an annuity or even a pension it's pretty simple. It's simply because you're spending and not stressing. And that's where the behavioral freedom and that optimization occurs. You have a ticket to spend or a license to spend, referring back to one of our previous episodes. And that's where the beauty really shines through. That's where it really comes full circle when you're in that situation Zach talked about there with being on a tee box, right? And when you've got a guaranteed paycheck coming into your bank account every single month, it affords you to not stress. And I don't know about you, man, but when I do my hobbies, whenever I play golf, the last thing I want to do is go out there and stress, you
Right.
know? So
Yeah.
that's really the key there, is understanding really where the benefits are amassed and with the income annuity into the plan. And that's really the beauty of it, is the less stress aspect. And man, I tell you what, when you take less stress and you take all that stress out of the equation, you have less of it. Not only does it optimize the rest of your portfolio for growth because your income is solidified, but so is your happiness, so is your health, so is your spouse, so is your family. Like the dividends that the income annuity keeps paying is more and is more than just you. It's all those people around you. And when you're happier and healthier, you're less of a burden to those around you. And that's another optimization that occurs. And I told you on another episode, I told you, Zach, that I had a gentleman, we did our annual review for his annuity he bought in 2021. And in that review, he's like, man, I love this thing. He's like, we've traveled all over the world. We're now going out. We just decked out a conversion van, like an RV type of thing. And we're going to go to every national park in the United States this year. And it's all because of this income annuity. I don't have to worry about a thing. And guess what? He's actually buying $730,000 more of guaranteed income that we're going to defer a little bit longer, so that he has like these feathers in his cap of when he does need more income in the future, he
Hmm.
can just turn it on like a water hose. And we broke it down into multiple contracts so he has flexibility and optionality of how much income he turns on and when he turns it on. So we broke that 730,000 over 3 contracts. And so what he can do is have that flexibility that long term If he needs a bit more income, he can activate one of the 3 contracts and let the other 2 grow on a guaranteed basis out into the future. And like the joy that this guy has in his voice, you can just hear it. And now he's to kind of pass the time. He's working part-time. He's driving an ambulance, or like he's driving an ambulance, but it's for like just transporting patients from one place to another. It's not anything medical really.
Okay.
And but he's loving it. He's like, dude, this is like the best work I've ever done. And I'm like, well, what do you enjoy about it? He's like, the part that I enjoy the most is that I don't have to do it. I want to do it.
Yep.
Like that's a different, like think about that. Having to and wanting to are such different things. And when you have an income annuity to tie it all together, having to time getting in and getting out of the market is no fun. Your money's telling you what to do. But if you have an income annuity, getting in and getting out of the market is not a have to anymore. If you want to, you have the freedom, you have the choice, but you don't
Yep.
have to. And what you're doing there is you're telling your money what to do. And that's the icing on the cake.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I've got two quick examples for you. One is, I've got a family member who's in the service, 20 plus years. So he's fortunate to have a benefit from his military service, but also has an annuity as well. And, talk about how spending your time how you want to. He volunteers at a kitchen 2 days a week. He doesn't have to. He helps out my mom when she's got home projects that I can't go help out with. He doesn't have to do that. He's got the time and the ability to do that, so he can make his choices and use that free time as he wants to. And the other example, we jokingly call. I've talked to you about this client before, Billy.
Billy Smalls.
That's right. So, he actually, we had added some additional funds to his existing annuity. He said, Zach, with this money, I'm retiring in June. So I'm ready to turn on this income. He said, it's all thanks to you. I said, no. I said, Bill, I said, this is your planning that put this in place. As much as I'd love to take credit for it, you took the first step in making a plan so that you would allow yourself this opportunity. So that really brings us to how we really manage those behaviors. And just that's the key thing that we're talking about today, right? That behavioral psychology and behavioral management of how we can set up and be successful when that time does come. And really, how do we avoid falling into these emotional traps of riding the market or getting in and out of the market in these situations? Number one is to have a plan. Having a plan in place, like we had talked about, nobody's really here to teach you that. We're doing what we can on our part. We're happy to continue doing it. And it's just having a plan, not just for growth, but also having an income plan. Because like we've talked about, unless you're fortunate enough to have a pension, you've got Social Security, but that's really going to cover roughly 40% of your needs. So having a plan being one, using tools like annuities to lock in a predictable income or predictable return would be another. Uh, Avoid checking the market daily. That's a tough one, especially depending upon how much you've got there. That's a retirement killer, right?
Absolutely.
Um, Also, just segmenting your money using a bucket strategy for a peace of mind. We talk about this a lot. Can you give an example of maybe what you've used in the past?
Yeah, when you look at just the foundational strategy for retirement planning, it starts again with that foundation of income. So if you want to think of it like a bucket strategy, or I prefer to use like a pyramid.
Yep.
Maslow's Maslow's hierarchy of needs was a psychological study of human needs and how they stack upon each other. And I transitioned that thought to retirement planning, and that's the retirement hierarchy, right? For a successful retirement. And the foundation of that pyramid is income.
Hmm.
And so if you think of building this pyramid or using a bucket strategy to segment your money, you're giving those buckets or those blocks of the pyramid different intended purposes. You can't just look at your nest egg of money and say, all right, this is going to be legacy. This is also going to be long-term care in the future. This is also going to be income now and into the future. This is also going to be growth so I can, buy an RV in the future. You can't look at one thing and expect it to solve all those problems and do those well and in an optimal manner. So the right approach is to take that nest egg and then start to segment it and give those buckets different intended purposes. And it starts with the first bucket or the first building block of the pyramid. That's income. So you take all your living expenses, add that up, create a budget monthly. What is the amount of money you need to be able to sustain your lifestyle today and into the future? You start today, though, just get that number. You add up your Social Security, what that amount is. If you have other sources of guaranteed income, pensions or annuities, you add all of those up, and whatever that adds up to, if there's a difference or a delta between what you need to live each month to sustain your lifestyle and how much income is coming in, then you fill the gap or bridge the gap. And that's where you put enough of your money into an income annuity to fill that gap and meet your living expense budget. And from there, once that first bucket's done, the second bucket's your growth bucket. That's where now, because we've risked off enough of your assets, enough of your nest egg to support your income need, and we have that income foundation solidified. Remember, building a house, you put the foundation down. Once that has occurred, the second bucket is your growth bucket. The growth bucket and the intended purpose is to grow your money, the remaining assets outside of the annuity, long term. And so now you have the ability to grow that money. You can use the S&P 500 index fund. You can use safer growth assets. But really, because you've risked off enough to support your income, it affords you to risk on the rest of those assets. So you can afford to be 100% in stocks with the rest of those assets if you so choose and have the stomach to do that. But that growth bucket, the intended purpose of it is to be for future, what we call unexpected spending shocks. Those would be like you have a healthcare situation that you didn't anticipate and you need some money to help with that. Or maybe your roof blows off in a hurricane. We're down here in Florida. That stuff happens all the time and you have a big deductible. Well, you can use the growth bucket for that. You can use it for leisure. So going on trips. I know that's what my client that I mentioned earlier, that's what he's doing. He's got enough income. Now he's using his growth assets to support this RV trip around the country. So the growth bucket is something that it's like a flex. It's like having the wild card in Uno, right? Or whatever that card was. Was
Yeah.
that the wild card? So like you can do whatever you want now.
Right.
Because you have it. That's what it's for. The third
And
bucket.
it's just defining that's that freedom, right? The freedom to
Yeah.
make a choice. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really what it's about. And so then there's a third bucket. The third bucket's liquidity, right? You should have sufficient liquidity, just a small little savings pot that's not necessarily invested in risky assets. It could be a savings account. It could be a bank CD. It could be a money market account. It could even be a fixed annuity of some sort, but you should have liquidity. So that, if you need a few $1,000, you don't have to tap into any investment to get it. You just have this little pot of money. Generally, that liquidity bucket is going to cover anywhere from 6 to 12 months of living expenses. So, if you have a $5,000 a month living expense, you might have 60K at most sitting in the savings account, right? Then the last but not least is the fourth bucket, and that's your legacy slash long-term care. Legacy slash long-term care. And if you think of like a visualization of like how one bucket runs over and fills the next bucket, runs over, fills the next bucket, so on and so forth, that's the optimization. Your income bucket, once it's filled up, it's going to run over, and now your growth bucket just starts filling, right? Think of that visualization. The growth bucket just starts filling up. And then because you don't need to touch it very often, that growth bucket fills up. Your liquidity bucket's already filled, should already be filled for the most part, but you can add more in there if you want. But last but not least, if all of those prior buckets are full and doing what they should be doing, again, giving it intended purpose and telling your money what to do, that legacy bucket overflows. And if you do have a need for long-term care and you unfortunately didn't have a plan that you had in place to secure traditional long-term care insurance, there are some annuities out there that can give you an enhanced income benefit for long-term care. But ultimately, that growth asset bucket can be part of your long-term care bucket as well. Again, it runs over and fills. But if you never have a need for long-term care, it's just a legacy bucket, and that passes on to your heirs or to a charity of your choice. But that's where the optimization comes in.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's just the ability to segment your money, have its defined purpose for it. The last one I want to hit on here, just in how to avoid falling into that emotional trap, is to work with somebody who does not have the emotional decision in making that you're making yourself, right? So whether that's speaking with a fiduciary, an independent advisor, somebody you can come to and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I've got going on. I need to bounce some ideas off of you in an objective manner. Obviously I'm biased because this is my money, so I need another opinion. And I've had those conversations where maybe we find out that an annuity is not a right fit, but at least they've had the ability to talk to somebody and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Does this fit within my planning?
Yeah, that's really key, is to talk to somebody that has objectivity, when you're emotional in that decision, and that they can truly give you sound advice and try to remove the emotion out of it and support it with factual data and sound planning. So, and that ties back here to this point, and that's just remember, the best plan is the one that you'll actually stick to.
Mm-hmm.
A boring plan that works beats a fancy one that fails. Having an income annuity is kind of boring when you
Yeah.
really think about it.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, income is king, and a fancy plan would be trying to manage, all of these things that go into a retirement plan, but using the markets or, one tool. That's fancy, right? Because, you got all these moving parts and things, and a lot of the uncontrollables are prevalent that you have no say over. So, um, a fancy one that fails is ultimately just that. It's a failure. I like the boring plan. I like the tried and true. I like the slow and steady. Again, remember the tortoise versus the hare, the
Yep.
tortoise and the hare. The tortoise won.
Yeah. I was just going to say the reason why that plan is boring is because your end goal is consistency.
Absolutely.
Right. So, it's funny because I was watching basketball last night. Example that Charles Barkley, of all people, gave was, you've got one, the difference between a great player and an inconsistent player is they may both average 20 points a night, but your inconsistent player is going to average seven, or is going to get 7 points one night, and they're going to get 33 points the next night. Well, he just averaged 20 points. But in the long term, that's not going to win you the games. You need somebody who's consistently doing the job. And I think that's, as we talk about retirement planning, consistently over time, having that plan and consistently working with it day in and day out so that there's no surprises that creep up.
Man, that's such a huge analogy right there, man. I love that. That really ties in, like, kind of like sequence of returns risk, right? You
Yep.
know, everybody says, "Oh, the S&P's averaged 7.5% since 1957." Okay, great. But yeah, there were years where it went up 30% and it dropped 25 the next. And if you average those two out, it looks like it was positive. But what did you do in that down year? That was a pretty tough year, especially if you're taking income.
Yep.
So yeah, I can't relate to that analogy, that basketball analogy anymore. That's amazing. I'm glad that you shared that.
Yeah. Um,
So we talked about real stories. So, we have several clients that talk about the benefits of annuities. They talk about how they're not concerned in this moment in time with the markets because of the license to spend that their annuity gives them. And that annuity gives them that, what did you call it, Zach? A psychological anchor?
that's right. So yeah, when we're looking at this, yeah, psychological anchor, the confidence is coming from having a foundation, right? Just having that foundation of income, having a foundation of security and retirement. Um, that's what the annuity is going to give you, and that's that psychological anchor. Yep,
Yeah, and it gives them the ticket to also stop checking the stock market every single stinking day.
that's right.
And that's really, really impactful there. So to wrap this up in a bow, our final thoughts here ultimately is when you look at retirement success, right, and the success of those outcomes, 80%, it's the classic 80-20 rule, right? 80% is behavior, 20% is markets. And if you can master your mind, you can master your money.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. Say that again. So, what was it? 80%?
80% of the success of outcomes in retirement's behavior, and 20% is market influenced.
Yeah. So, just how we're reacting to that market. Are we going to, yeah, are we going to make a bad decision in getting out of the market? Yeah, really appreciate that. So, yeah, using tools like annuities to protect your emotions from making those decisions is key. That's really the key piece to that retirement.
Absolutely. So if you'd like to, if this really resonated with you, please first and foremost, please like, share, give us a thumbs up on YouTube, give us a comment on what you thought about this episode. It really helps us, helps our algorithm reach more people that can therefore educate them on this subject matter. And they may be dealing with a really tough time given the markets, and they're looking for a plan. They're looking for the right tools to put into their plan to help them ultimately protect themselves from their own emotions and making poor decisions. And we would appreciate that. Also, we are an independent annuity advisory firm. We make our living by helping people put annuities in place. And we hope that through our transparent and educational process, that we can earn your business and earn your trust, more importantly, and that you will use our firm to purchase those annuities and put them into your overall plan. And if you'd like to work with us, we would love the opportunity to serve you. And you can do that by checking the show notes here or the description of this episode. There will be a link that you can book your annuity discovery meeting. It's absolutely free of charge. There's no cost to you other than your valuable time. We'll connect with you on Zoom with one of our senior annuity advisors here at Annuity Association. And we'll take you through a discovery process of understanding what matters most to you and what's important and what you're currently dealing with, and ultimately educate you on how to appropriately apply an annuity to your plan to create optimizations, not just economical, but on the psychological aspects of retirement and giving you more peace of mind. So if you'd like to do that, you can book that time there at that link. If you would just like to see some annuities on a report to see how much income you may be able to generate from your hard earned investment, we can generate a report that's custom and tailored to you. There will be a link to request that free report as well. But we'd like to thank you for tuning in to another episode of the I Love Annuities podcast. This is Jeremiah Conger
Zach Van Ness, and we are the Annuity Dudes.
and we are signing off. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon.